Welcome to StoryWise English. Today we'll explore two tales of courage, determination, and resourcefulness. As we journey through these stories, we'll also uncover useful English learning tips inspired by the text. Let's begin.
The Sandy Road. Once upon a time a merchant, with his goods packed in many carts, came to a desert. He was on his way to the country on the other side of the desert. The sun shone on the fine sand, making it as hot as the top of a stove. No man could walk on it in the sunlight. But at night, after the sun went down, the sand cooled, and then men could travel upon it. So the merchant waited until after dark, and then set out. Besides the goods that he was going to sell, he took jars of water, and of rice and firewood, so that the rice could be cooked. All night long he and his men rode on and on. One man was the guide. He rode first, for he knew the stars, and by them he guided the drivers. At daybreak they stopped and camped. They unyoked the oxen and fed them. They built fires and cooked the rice. Then they spread a great covering over all the carts and the oxen, and the men lay down under it to rest until sunset. In the early evening, they again built fires and cooked rice. After supper, they folded the covering and put it away. They yoked the oxen, and, as soon as the sand was cool, they started again on their journey across the desert. Night after night, they traveled in this way, resting during the heat of the day. At last, one morning, the guide said, "In one more night, we shall get out of the sand." The men were glad to hear this, for they were tired. After supper that night, the merchant said, "You may as well throw away nearly all the water and the firewood. By tomorrow we shall be in the city. Yoke the oxen and start on." Then the guide took his place at the head of the line. But instead of sitting up and guiding the drivers, he lay down in the wagon on the cushions. Soon he was fast asleep, because he had not slept for many nights, and the light had been so strong in the daytime that he had not slept well then. All night long the oxen went on. Near daybreak, the guide awoke and looked at the last stars fading in the light. "Stop!" he called to the drivers. "We are in the same place where we were yesterday. The oxen must have turned about while I slept." They unyoked the oxen, but there was no water for them to drink. They had thrown away the water that was left the night before. So the men spread the covering over the carts, and the oxen lay down, tired and thirsty. The men, too, lay down, saying, "The wood and water are gone. We are lost." But the merchant said to himself, "This is no time for me to sleep. I must find water. The oxen cannot go on if they do not have water to drink. The men must have water. They cannot cook rice unless they have water. If I give up, we shall all be lost. There must be water somewhere below." On and on he walked, keeping close watch of the ground. At last he saw some grass. "There must be water somewhere below, or that grass would not be there," he said. He ran back, shouting to the men, "Bring the spade and the hammer." They jumped up and ran with him to the spot where the grass grew. They began to dig, and soon they struck a rock and could dig no further. Then the merchant jumped down into the hole they had dug and put his ear to the rock. "I hear water running under this rock," he called to them. "We must not give up." Then the merchant came out of the hole and said to one of his men, "My boy, if you give up, we are lost. You go down and try." The boy stood up straight and raised the hammer high above his head. He hit the rock as hard as ever he could. He would not give in. They must be saved. Down came the hammer. This time the rock broke, and the boy had hardly time to get out of the well before it was full of cool water. The men drank as if they never could get enough, and then they watered the oxen and bathed. Then they built a fire and cooked their rice. Feeling better, they rested throughout the day. They set up a flag on the well for travelers to see. At sunset, they started on again, and the next morning they reached the city, where they sold the goods and then returned home. The end.
Vocabulary building. Desert. A dry, sandy area with little water or vegetation. Example: the merchant had to cross the desert to reach the city on the other side. Guide. A person who leads others on a journey. Example: the guide knew how to follow the stars to navigate through the desert. Hammer and spade, tools used for breaking rocks and digging. Example: the merchant used a hammer and spade to dig for water beneath the rock. Unyoked. It means to free something from a yoke or harness. Example: they unyoked the oxen and fed them. Ox. A castrated bull used as a draft animal. Plural noun. Oxen. Grammar focus, cause and effect sentences. This story provides excellent examples of how actions lead to outcomes. Because for cause. Because the guide fell asleep, the oxen turned back to their starting point. So, for effect. The men dug until they found water so they could save the oxen and themselves. Expressions and phrases. No time to sleep. A phrase that shows urgency and the need to act. Example: the merchant thought, "This is no time for me to sleep. I must find water." Strike a rock. To encounter resistance or an obstacle. Example: when the men dug, they struck a rock, but they did not give up. Dialogue practice. Motivational speech. This story contains an inspiring moment of leadership. The merchant: if you give up, we are lost. You must keep trying. The boy: I will not give in. We must be saved. Learning tip. Practice reading dialogues aloud with expressions to improve your pronunciation and confidence in speaking English. Story retelling for practice. Summarize the story using simple sentences to focus on clarity and fluency. Problem: the travelers ran out of water in the desert because the guide fell asleep and the oxen turned back. Solution: the merchant motivated his men to dig for water under a rock, and they succeeded in saving everyone. Morale: determination and teamwork can overcome even the toughest challenges. Learning tip. Use this structure to practice retelling other stories or events in your own words.
The Quarrel of the Quails. Once upon a time, many quails lived together in a forest. The wisest of them all was their leader. A man lived near the forest and earned his living by catching quails and selling them. Day after day, he listened to the note of the leader calling the quails. At last, this man was able to call the quails together. Hearing the note, the quails thought it was their leader who called. When they were crowded together, the man threw his net over them, and off he went into the town, where he soon sold all the quails that he had caught. The wise leader saw the plan of the man for catching the quails. He called the birds to him and said, "This man is carrying away so many of us. We must put a stop to it. I have thought of a plan. The next time the man throws a net over you, each of you must put your head through one of the little holes in the net. Then all of you together must fly away to the nearest bush. You can leave the net on the bush and be free yourselves." The quails said that was a very good plan, and they would try it the next time the man threw the net over them. The very next day the man came and called them together. Then he threw the net over them. The quails lifted the net and flew away with it to the nearest bush. They left it there and flew back to their leader to tell him how well his plan had worked. The man was busy until evening getting his net off the bush, and he went home empty-handed. The next day the same thing happened, and the next. His wife was angry because he did not bring home any money, but the man said, "The fact is those quails are working together now. The moment my net is over them, off they fly with it, leaving it on a bush. As soon as the quails begin to quarrel, I shall be able to catch them." Not long after this, One of the quails flying down on their feeding ground hit another's head by accident. "Who hit my head?" angrily cried the second. "I did, but I didn't mean to." "Don't be angry," said the first quail. But the second quail was angry and said bad words. Soon all the quails had taken part in this quarrel. When the man came that day, he threw his net over them, and this time instead of flying off with it, one side said, "Now you lift the net," and the other side said, "Lift it yourself." "You try to make us lift it all," said the quails on one side. "No, we don't," said the others. "You begin and we will help." But neither side began. So the quails quarreled, and while they were quarreling, the man caught them all in his net. He took them to town and sold them for a good price. The end.
Vocabulary. Quails. Small migratory game birds known for their distinctive calls. Quarrel. A heated argument or disagreement. Net. A mesh used for catching animals. Bush. A small plant or shrub. Grammar focus, past simple tense. Sentences from present to past. The man catches quails. The man caught quails. The quails quarrel. The quails quarreled. Moral of the story. Unity is strength. When the quails worked together, they were able to escape and protect themselves. However, when they quarreled and acted selfishly, they were easily captured. The story teaches the importance of teamwork, cooperation, and avoiding unnecessary conflicts to achieve success. Quiz questions. 1. What did the leader suggest the quails do with the net? A. Tear the net into pieces. B. Lift the net together and place it on a bush. C. Fly away without the net. B. Lift the net together and place it on a bush. 2. Why couldn't the quails escape the net at the end? A. They were too tired to fly. B. They quarreled and refused to work together. C. The man used a stronger net. B. They quarreled and refused to work together. 3. What is the moral of the story? A. Unity is strength. B. Practice makes perfect. C. Always follow your leader's orders. A. Unity is strength. This concludes another inspiring story. Join us next time as we unravel the wisdom of yet another Jataka tale, filled with life lessons and opportunities to enrich your English skills. See you in the next video on StoryWise English.